Started because I know it's a sort of off week. We usually meet the fourth Monday of the month, but with next week being a holiday, we went ahead and switched it to today. We're talking tonight about transitions from elementary to middle and middle to high school. And for the first half hour, we have Omar Gardino, and I hope I didn't say that wrong. And he's from the Child Mind Institute, and they have their, I'll let you give the full background here, but
Sure.
I learned about them because they've just got a set of informational videos supporting families of kids and different things to think about and how to get them extra help. So I'll let you go ahead and take it away. I really appreciate you coming tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. As Rita mentioned, my name is Omar Gardino. I'm a clinical child and adolescent psychologist by training, and I'm the deputy director for the San Francisco Bay Area office of the Child Mind Institute. And we're here today for a conversation really around school transitions. Now, the Child Mind Institute is an independent national nonprofit dedicated to transforming the lives of children and families struggling with mental health and learning disorders. And our work focuses around three different areas. One is research, really thinking about the forefront of neuroscience efforts to really understand and address children's difficulties with mental health and learning challenges. We have a big focus on clinical care with clinical centers, both in our headquarters in New York City and here in San Mateo. And we focus on providing the latest evidence-based treatments for a range of learning and mental health issues for kids and adolescents. And then we also focus on public education, and I'll share some of these with you towards the end of this presentation, where we focus on really equipping caregivers, educators, policymakers with the right information to be able to support kids, to end stigma, and to really think about how we build schools and communities that can give kids the supports they need to thrive. Our focus for today was really thinking about school transitions, again, with that focus on elementary to middle school transitions and middle school to high school transitions. And then I wanted to point you to some of the resources that we have available through our website, and then to spend time for questions and discussion as well. So thanks to those of you that attended today, and for those of you watching this recorded, thank you for your time. I want to start by thinking about, as you approach this time of change for your kids, for your families, what are the kinds of things that are on your mind? What are the kinds of questions or worries or thoughts that come up as you think about your child's transition? What are some examples of those? Feel free to put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself if you would like. Thinking about the kinds of thoughts, worries, concerns, questions that you might have.
Nothing's in the chat yet, but I know a year ago when my daughter was moving from elementary to middle, it was concerns around her feeling kind of lost with having to change classrooms and not being with her friends, that kind of thing.
And I have a general question. How
Yes.
early do you start talking to them about middle school? I didn't want to start telling my son about it, in May. But they're talking about it in school, and I don't want to give them things that I'm like, you'll find out in August. You'll find out in August. How early do you prep them?
Good. So questions about what's the right level of information and how to balance that. So two good examples so far. And if you really think about, those questions that drive our concerns, that it's typically questions like, what's it going to be like for them? What's it going to be like for us? They might have questions like that themselves, right? What is it going to look like to be a middle schooler or a high schooler? What if I can't do it? What if it's too hard? Sometimes kids get these messages that school's going to be way harder, like wait till you get to middle school or wait till you get to high school. It's going to be 1,000 times harder socially or academically. So there's lots of anxiety that might be built up over many years of thinking that this is a really huge transition with a lot of unknowns. And for some kids, it's already thinking about, well, now grades start to count and let's be thinking about college. So you know your kids best, but it's really this idea of how far ahead are they thinking, and the more unknowns there are, the more anxiety or stress that there might be. So one thing to start thinking about as we think about these transitions is that transitions mean different things for different kids. And there are some objective things that come with these transitions, like there's typically a new school. or maybe changes in class sizes, definitely changes in teachers, definitely changes in the number of teachers or the peers that are around, new opportunities for peer interactions, sometimes new academic challenges or new opportunities to develop new skills. And for many kids, it's pretty much the same thing, right? When you think about what school looks like, that for many kids, there's a large percentage that stays fairly similar. They go to classes, they spend time with peers, they do homework. So even though there's lots of unknowns, there's a lot of it that stays the same throughout their education. So really thinking about this, what does this transition mean for my child specifically becomes a really important question. And we want to start by thinking about, again, what are some of those positives that come with that transition? Are they really excited about extracurricular activities or new subjects that they get to explore? As you move higher in education, you get to do a little bit more personalizing and to pick electives and do things in a way that makes sense for you. So there's a little bit more control from the student side. And those opportunities for positive peer interactions, right? As peers are becoming a more important part of their life, that there's opportunity for more peers and for interacting with peers in much different ways, whether it's through clubs, through activities, through one-on-one interactions, and for really developing much deeper relationships. And then there might be negatives specifically for your child as well, thinking about the stress that might come with these social demands and these academic demands. So we're trying to really think about, for your child specifically, what are some of those positives and negatives? So really starting with this assessment of the situation, right? What has school been like for my child so far? And what do I anticipate is going to be a challenge for them as they transition into middle school? Is it going to be organization? Is it going to be the size of the school? You also know your child and might know what's going to go well for them. And you might say, well, these are things that are going to be really great for them, right? They didn't really get along with their previous teacher. Now they get a chance for 5 or 6 different teachers. Or now they get a chance to really, they really thrive at a sport or an art or music. They really get to do that at a much more intensive level. So really starting, knowing your child and saying, what are those positives? What are those negatives? And really thinking about what are those unknowns, right? What are the questions that we still have? And this becomes a really simple way to start to say, we can start with a really big unknown of what's the future going to look like. But if we can pare it down in this way, it starts to feel more manageable for parents, but also for the children themselves. And we had a question earlier about when is it too early to start talking about this with kids? And you might follow their lead and say, are they already thinking about some of this, right? They know they're going to wrap up their previous school. What do they know about their next school? Do they know where it is? Do they know who their teachers are, what the classes are going to look like? That you might start talking about it in this way. What are those things they're looking forward to? And what are the questions that they have? Right? Sometimes we're worried about maybe creating more anxieties by asking lots of questions, but really saying, is it something that they're thinking about? And if they are thinking about it, that this opens a really nice opportunity to say, let's think about what's going through their minds. What questions do they already have that you might be able to answer really quickly? And what questions do they have that we might need to do some research on? Right? So as your kids start to make that transition, it's really important to think about that early phase, right? That there's always that first phase where we might say the first month of school, for example, where it's just going to be different, right? And we kind of accept that it's going to be different. It's going to require some adjustment. So it's going to require learning how to navigate a new campus, maybe. It's going to mean being away from some of your old peers. It's going to mean meeting some new people and maybe making some new friends. Definitely going to include meeting new teachers and new adults, new counselors, and learning about the rules and expectations in this new setting. And definitely developing new routines, right? There might be a different start time or a different way to school or a different morning routine to get to school. So really allowing for that space to say there's a lot of adjustment that happens and it should feel like change, right? Change is hard sometimes, but it's okay. We know that it's going to happen and we know that there's going to be an adjustment period. And one of the things we start to think about during this phase is really kind of what drives our anxiety. What drives the sense of worry or the sense of concern? And a really simple way to think about anxiety is that it's this balance between the risks that we see and the resources that we think we might have to deal with them. So it might be really easy for you and your child to really think about all of the challenges that are going to come with high school, or all of the challenges that come with middle school, right? There's going to be so many kids and so much work that they might be really good at remembering and noticing all of the risky things or all of the things that are going to make this transition a challenge, but they might forget about all of the resources that they have as students, as part of their family, within the school. But it might be really hard for them to remember those things. And this is one thing we can really do to help kids feel grounded and ready for that transition, is to really remind them of those resources that they have. So for example, right, they might think about there's so much more work coming, right? What are those experiences of success that they've had before doing challenging things? Did they really work hard to improve their math grade in the past, right? Really helping them see that they've done many of those steps before. Or is it making new friends and really helping them remember all the friends that they made when they played football, or the friends that they made at dance class? Or reminding them about things like all of the new students are transitioning as well. And there's lots of things like orientations that happen and lots of opportunities for parents to ask questions. And lots more contact with school counselors maybe than there had been in elementary schools. So really seeing those resources as being there and really highlighting the fact that students can access those resources, right? That there's much more autonomy, much more independence, much more ability to reach out to an adult, and maybe more adults to really think about finding those right relationships. So one thing we want to do as we start to think about these unknowns is really think about what are the risks that your child is seeing? What are those concerns that come up for them or the questions that they have? And how can we help them remember or recognize the resources that they have in place to deal with those challenges? And again, they might be personal resources, right? You might say your child's really likable. They have lots of friends. They've never had trouble making friends. It could be family resources, things that you can do to help them make those connections, or to help them connect them to tutoring, connect them to the counselors, or things available at the school. As you get to know the school better, what are the things that they already have in place to help students make that transition? So really start to think about, how do we prepare for this, right? How do we start to think about the time between now and when they start? And that we want to start to research and become familiar with the school. Right, I understand that after this conversation, you're going to have another opportunity to learn much more in much more detail. What are some of those opportunities that you and your child will have to understand what is specifically going to be expected at your schools? So really thinking about what are those academic expectations, what are the kinds of courses your child's going to be taking that first semester? What are the support systems that they have in place already? Right, who are those school counselors and teachers? Who are the peers? Maybe they have a sibling that's gone to the same school, or people in the neighborhood that have gone to the same school. So really making sure that they have that understanding and that connection to others that have been successful before at this school. And then to start thinking about what are those new social opportunities that they want to embrace. Again, what are the things that they look forward to, whether it's a science club or track. Really thinking about those opportunities that they're going to be pursuing to make those new social connections. To really remember that you have peers and adults to seek support from. And again, that can be folks within the school or outside of the school. And to really be establishing that open communication with caregivers. So again, starting from now to really think about, how are they feeling about wrapping up elementary school, wrapping up middle school, right? That there's a nice opportunity now for celebration, for looking towards the future. And again, for some kids, they really have lots of thoughts already. For others, they might really not be wanting to talk about it quite yet. But if you can open that door just to say, I wonder if you thought about it. What are your thoughts about the next year? Here's one thing that I'm wondering. Or, hey, I went to this PTA meeting. We talked a little bit about middle school. Do you have any questions about the kinds of things that we talked about? I had some questions and I asked this. What questions do you have? So those are just opportunities to broach the topic. And again, maybe not expecting a very long conversation or a very in-depth conversation, but really not shying away from the subject. And again, really thinking about this as an opportunity to follow their lead, right? If they ask you a follow-up question, that gives you a really good sense of what they're thinking about and what you can help with. And for others, it just broaches the topic. They might not really engage with the discussion, but you can revisit it again in the future, right? Is it time to think about signing up for classes? Is it time to think about what school supplies you might need, right? That those are all opportunities to be prepared practically, but also to be prepared emotionally and socially. Again, giving kids the opportunities, the scaffolding to really take, to have a solid foundation as they transition to school, to give them that room to grow, to give them that information, that scaffolding, that support. to remind them there's lots of children in their same place, and to remind yourselves that you have a cohort here of parents or caregivers in very similar places, right, with very similar kinds of questions. So really giving yourself that space to say, what does this transition look like for my family, for my child? And how do I know that they're doing okay, right? How do I know that information has been enough? How do I know that they're starting to feel like they have a handle, that they're developing these new routines, that they're, able to keep track of their assignments, that they're able to advocate for themselves, that they're able to find somebody to sit with at lunch, right? That those things are happening. And then to also be thinking about what are some of those unexpected challenges? Like, how do I know if things are not going well? How do I know if it's been 2 or 3 months and they're really having some challenges? They don't want to go to school. They seem really tearful. They are having lots of social conflict. We don't really know what that is, but we know that they're not getting along with others, or they're having trouble academically. And in those cases, we really want to be able to say, at what point do we start to move from that typical transition phase to say, maybe I wonder if things really aren't going well. And in those cases, you really want to be thinking about at what point do we want to intervene and how do we want to intervene? What's the right level of intervention? So we might start to ask ourselves as caregivers, what are those behaviors that are worrying me? Again, is it that they're not doing their homework? Is it that they're afraid to go to school? Is it that they are going to the nurse's office many times a day? Like, what are those behaviors that concern me? And to really ask ourselves, how often is this happening? Is this really a one-off behavior, or is it happening multiple times a week or multiple times a month? And then are these behaviors outside of what's typical for this age range? And how long has it been going on? Because we want to give kids that opportunity to really transition. But if it's been going on for weeks or months, we might start to say, maybe this is something else. Maybe this is something that could benefit from additional supports. And we really want to pay attention to how much is it bothering your child? How distressed are they by what's going on? Or how much is it getting in the way of relationships with you, with peers? That if it's getting to that point, we really say, maybe it's time for additional supports. Now, when we think about what those additional supports might be, I like to think about starting with the local school, right? Thinking about what's already available within your classrooms. Are teachers or counselors somebody to reach out to say, I wonder if you have any concerns about my child? Have you noticed anything about how they're doing? Or they say that nobody sits with them at lunch. Have you noticed that that's the case? To really start to maybe get a better sense of are there others who have seen the concerns or maybe have additional information for you? But more importantly, are there things that can easily happen? Sometimes teachers do a really nice job of saying, I think they'd be really good friends with this person. Let me find ways to connect them to this other student. Or let me find a more structured activity for them to do during lunch. Or let me make sure that I keep an eye out on this to see if I can get more information. So really starting with that, can they support the child's success? Another place to think about is our website. If you go to childmind.org, you'll see lots of wonderful resources for educators, for caregivers. If you look here in this centerpiece under education, there's a resource center there that answers lots of questions, whether it's concerns about how do I know if my child has anxiety, how do I find the right therapist for them, how do I support, what's the right level of screen time, things like that. So lots of questions that have come across your mind, you'll find resources there. And those are written in really digestible ways. Sometimes there's a brief summary, there's an audio version, and then there's a longer article. So you get to choose the level of information that you want. Site, you can also find a more recent resource that was developed, a much more extensive resource, really focused on supporting parents. And this is a large project called Positive Parenting's Thriving Kids, developed with input from thousands of parents across the state of California, really thinking about what are some of those most challenging or pressing issues and questions that families have. And for each of these, it got narrowed down to 20 topics. And for these 20 topics, there's a video and resources. There's interviews with experts, with caregivers, with youth themselves. And it's a nice little package of, again, a digestible way to approach pressing topics, everything from gender identity to bullying, to experiences with community violence, you name it. And again, this becomes a really nice resource where you might watch the video together, and it becomes a nice conversation starter. Each one of these videos also comes with a resource guide for parents, where it gives you top 10 tips, for example. It links you to other websites where you might get additional information. So this becomes a really nice one-stop shop for free resources, again, to be able to broach some of these topics. I'll show you a quick snippet of one of them really focused around friendships, just so you get a sense for what these are like.
Our younger daughter, Natalie, she shows up to an event and is like, I'm here. Hello, everyone. I'm ready to be your best friend. Whereas Allie is much more like, find a buddy.
Yeah.
And just kind of stick to them at a social event.
I tend to be very kind of quiet and reserved. It can be kind of hard to start to make friends by just going up and talking to them, because that can be pretty scary.
Trying to make friends is also stressful.
My children's friendships are polar opposites. Kalea can make friends with anybody. Kyrus, on the other hand, he likes to control everything outside of him.
I've been a foster parent for about 5 years. He really has a hard time relating to his peers. At school, he deliberately chooses not to make friends because, in his words, he just knows that will come back to bite him.
A healthy friendship is one where someone can be their authentic self, where they can share interests and communicate effectively and learn and grow together. There are also unhealthy friendships, ones where we are made to do things that we don't feel comfortable doing, or where we aren't able to effectively communicate what we need or want with each other.
My younger son was really looking forward to having a sleepover at our house. It started out great, but at some point throughout the night, one of the kids ended up turning all the other friends against my son, and they ended up kicking him out of his own sleepover. We'd organized the room and the beds, and we had some extra mattresses where everybody had their own unique sleeping spot inside the room. And my son was sleeping in a totally different area of the house, all by himself with no blankets. And that was the beginning of a very, very challenging year for him.
To see that he's struggling to make friends makes me feel really sad. And I don't want to cry. And I feel like I can't help.
My oldest son, Jordan, because of his quirks and tendencies, he doesn't have a lot of friends. Just going to pick him and his sister up, I always had to brace myself for what kind of day he had.
She was coming home every day, and you can see just the face of being defeated. And as a parent, I was so sad for her.
Just one friend is always all he needs.
I'll show you a quick snippet of that because I know we're running out of time. But again, there's 20 topics. Each one of those has, that's about a third of the videos. And then again, there's their downloadable resources. The whole website's available in English and in Spanish with a whole new set of videos as well. So if you know others that can benefit from that, please let them know about it. And then there's the component or complementary sites focused on healthy minds, thriving kids. And I wanted to show you two pieces. One of those is a website for middle schoolers. And this is really focused around parents and educators. And here there are 5 different skills that kids can learn. And you might think about this as a kind of an approach to prevention, really making sure that kids have these social and emotional skills as they're entering middle school. This might be a really nice thing to watch with them over the summer. And again, these are just quick 5-minute videos to talk about a skill like identifying feelings or managing strong emotions. And again, really just to make sure that they have those tools that you open the door to talk about things like emotions about transitions to school. And each one will also have a nice resource guide that you can download. And then the site for high schoolers includes a section for parents, for educators, and also for students themselves. So if they want to explore some of the side themselves, they really can. And it's the same skills, just really presented at a much more developmentally appropriate level for teenagers. I know we're over time, so I just want to give you the opportunity for if there's any quick questions that I can answer. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out by email, and I'd be happy to address any other concerns or questions that have come up.
Thank you so much. And I actually sent out I tried to send out to all of the parents in Berkeley Unified School District those linked to the positive parenting videos. So I think everybody will have gotten that. It should have gone out in everybody's newsletters this last week. Guy, do you want to do your question? I think that's really.
Sure. My question is post-COVID, what have been your top challenges you've been seeing for kids transitioning into middle school and to high school?
Great question. The most common thing we see when we visit schools is families, us teachers and kids talking about anxiety. Now it's really about kind of getting ready with those big transitions or those big changes. That COVID was a really unsettling time for lots of us, right? It really kind of turned things on their head, and that it really created this sense of uncertainty and questions about, what can change at a moment's notice, and that it really in some ways helped kids and adults really feel much more wary about entering these new situations that used to be pretty typical, right? You just started new schools, you went to a new job, you entered a restaurant, but all of a sudden these things that we thought of as safe were all of a sudden maybe not safe, and we really started to question some of those things. So it's this sense of hesitation, the sense of not knowing, and the sense of wariness. And I think it really does take kids a little bit longer to kind of know what to expect and to really trust that things are going to be the way that they are. So I think part of it is giving kids grace and saying, these transitions are hard. They were hard when we did them, but they might be a little bit harder now. There's so much transition and so much stress and so much pressure on kids these days that we really want to approach that with just a level of grace and to again, really help kids find that balance between these are all the concerns that they have and how can we help them also pay attention to the resources that they have around, so that they're not just focused on the potentials for danger, for failure, for not getting into college. Really thinking about all of the people and resources that are there that sometimes we forget about when we're focused on the things that scare us.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. So this video is going to go out to all our parents as well, so they'll be able to have your introduction here to things to consider and some resources and supports that people can have. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate it, and I really value all the resources that Childmind does. It's really great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I feel badly that this is now just there's only a few of us here, but at the same time, again, like I think if we'll be able to put that in an email out that people can get to. So for the people who are here, are any of you parents who have kids transitioning from, because that was supposed to be our topic tonight, transitions from elementary to middle and middle to high school. And we wanted to make sure that there's some people at different middle schools and able to speak to what those experiences might look like. And if not, then we can move on to other things.
I was curious so I'm a transition, my kids are transitioning to middle school, and I know we have Liz and we have Namota, they have two middle schoolers. He was actually curious about orientation and how does that look like, and I was told that the schools all do it differently. So if you guys can speak to that, what does middle school look like the first week for a rising for a sixth grader? That would be awesome.
Sure. I'll jump in and talk about King. My name is Liz McKenzie. I have two daughters. One is a 7th grader at King. The other is a 10th grader at Berkeley High, and they are both proud Craigmont grads. The orientation at King really starts, there's a welcome fair that's usually the day, the Friday before school starts. I think this year it was maybe, I can't remember. I feel like school started on a
Wednesday.
It was really big. A Wednesday, so I think it was on Monday. Anyway, it's relatively close to the first day of school. It's also, by the way, like one of the big PTA first activities, because while there's a lot of school staff doing the all important job of handing out schedules, which is the kids' for big concern, of course, seeing who's in their class, which friends are in their classes, what teachers they got. But we set it up in the gym, and there are different stations that they need to visit. So they get a card as they come in, and they need to visit every station before the last station, which is their schedule. So there's things about yearbook, about PE, about sports, about after school. It's PTA, that's more for the parents. So a variety of tables and activities and information that is, conveyed to them. Then they get their schedule. And during this entire time, there are 8th graders who are available, and kids can go on tours of the actual school, because that's the main thing. And my limited experience with 2 kids, both from middle school and high school, their main concern was getting lost. So having an 8th grader in small groups show you where all the classrooms are was a very good. It was good for both of my kids to get that security of knowing, at least for first period, where they went. They may have forgotten the other classes, but at least they would know where to go for first period. So that's the main orientation, is that welcome fair before school starts.
My daughter's at King now as a 6th grader, and I'm trying to remember when those letters go out to know when that happens. I think it's just maybe a couple weeks before.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you part of the challenge is that the PTA actually sends those letters out. So I think they ideally would have gone out a little bit earlier this year, but a lot of them were sitting on my dining room table up until like 3 weeks before.
Well, and I think too, like,
yeah.
it has to be within 2 days, because I don't think the teachers are working before that. And if you want like teachers to be present, then
yes, definitely. So so that's the main orientation. I will say, and then I'll let Namoda obviously talk. But one of the other nice things at King is that they do 6th grade welcome dinners, and that is held during the fall, and they are divided by your cohort, your switch teachers. So probably the other middle schools do it this way too, where there are kids or teachers that teach the humanities, and then math and science, and then all the kids in that cohort have the same paired teachers. So those paired teachers and all the kids in those cohorts are assigned a specific evening, usually like a Thursday evening. We all meet in the dining commons, and the PTA coordinates a catered dinner, but then there's a potluck aspect for drinks and dessert and snacks and such. So that's a really nice time for parents to meet. I mean, the kids at that point already sort of know each other, but since, as all of you or some of you already may know, once you go off to middle school, that whole idea of the class list and the class parent and the email list is no more. So you might get very scant information from your kid about some new friend they have, and they only know their first name, and kids don't necessarily have phones at this age. So that's a nice part for the parents.
I don't know that that's common to all the schools. Does Willard and Longfellow also have the concept of, just two teachers that do those 4 classes and that it's the same kids getting those pairs?
I think all of the middle schools have like the gentle transition. So 6th grade is a little different than 7th and 8th grade. And then it's similar in 9th grade. Like there's an intentional way of trying to like transition the kids, you know? So I know that Willard for sure is, I don't know Longfellow firsthand, but I'm pretty sure that it's a universal approach.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was gonna say for Longfellow, our orientation day was a little similar to what Liz said, as far as going to different stations and PTA having a presence. We are in the process of trying to make it more fun and more welcoming. Just because last year for Longfellow was a little bit of a transition year because of the rezoning. So things, you know, kind of changed a little. As far as the cohorts go, I believe that's true. One thing that I noticed that was really comforting for me is that there is a lot of communication between teachers and the parents, so you're not always left out in the dark with 6th grade, and and because 6th grade has a dedicated, you know, annex, they feel like and separate lunch, which I believe King also has, right? And Willard, I'm sure all of them have separate, and that was really comforting. I don't know if you had any other questions. I don't know if I made you feel better, but yeah. Yeah, the transition was nice. And what I found, and I don't, Liz, you can tell me if it was the same, if it's the same at King, but we were reunited with people that my kid played soccer with in kindergarten, or I mean, you know, or before the school started, and, you know, different people that he had met from other areas who went to different schools, and now they're all, you know, they're together, you know, so there's new friends that were made. And
yeah, no, I definitely saw the same, though I got a lot of reactions of rolled eyes and such because I said, oh, there's so and so from preschool, and it's got a shrug. But I'm sure that then I find out later that they've, you know, reestablished those connections. They just weren't going to admit that I in any way was part of it, which is fine.
No, I'm not saying that I was anyway part of it. And I also had a boy, you know, a little bit more like, you know, people like, do you remember me? And he's like, no, I don't know who you know what I mean? He's like, no. He's a little bit more shy. But, yeah. And, you know, if they really are freaked out, you can just kind of remind them in 3 years, they're gonna be back together after 3 years. And I think it's reassuring with like, if your kids do sports or even like music, they reunite with a lot of their friends. So like my son still has really close friends that are at King. And that just because they're at different middle schools, it didn't, you know, sever their relationship.
That playing at the A's game was a nice like unifying thing across all the schools that they all did together.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll say if you have a kid transitioning into middle school and they are at all open to doing either band, orchestra, or choir for 0 period, I would highly recommend, just because that for both of my girls was a really nice way of finding a smaller community while they were able to use that to scaffold off and find their larger new friend group, because a lot of friend groups definitely really evolve a lot. And not so much my older, because she spent 7th grade in her bedroom, but for the younger, definitely it all really changes a lot fast.
I know it's nice to be able to nudge kids and say, listen, Berkeley is really known for having a better music program than other places. And this is a unique thing to take advantage of, we invest in that.
Yeah, and if they are into music, there's the B Muse, which happens right for the 2 weeks right after school lets out, which is a nice transition. I think a lot of people don't know about it. Last year, they had rising 6th graders and they also had rising 5th graders. So
yeah, they did that orientation. They did that orientation last week. We attended that. That sounded great.
Well, is there other things we want to try and talk about? Again, this sort of will be messaged out to other families. I appreciate everyone coming tonight. We didn't want to try and have a meeting on Memorial Day, so it was nice to try and do this.
Yeah, we had, I don't know if we want to wrap up. We did have other topics to talk about, but I don't know if this group can actually talk about some of these things. Are folks ready to kind of wrap up on this this transition topic and move on to other business? Yeah.
Sure.
Let's do it. Okay. So Rita, do you see in the agenda, first topic was budget cuts. I think that was a big concern last meeting.
Yeah, and I think the short answer is we're still waiting to hear about some of this, right? Like just today, I think either today or no, I think it's tomorrow, the 21st, is when I think is it Vivian Ferguson who goes to the workshop to really find out the numbers for us for next year, so that we have sort of a full picture of what the budget will be, which will then sort of be more clear. I think one of the things that I've learned the past 5 months sitting on this budget advisory committee is it seems like a lot of people get pink slipped with a sort of nudge that they're planning on not actually getting let go. And so that whole system seems very problematic to me, where it's like, so does getting a pink slip mean anything at this point? It means that you might not have a job, but you might. And it just seems very unclear. There was the garden program didn't get the funding that they wanted from one of the grants they applied for, but then there was talk about how the governor is giving a lot more money to the nutrition program. And so I was unclear. Actually, I don't think Jennifer's here anymore, but if she was, I'd be asking if she understood that better, if there's a way to utilize some of those monies towards garden. It sort of seems like within the scheme of things, the garden program doesn't actually need, so the superintendent's planning that we need to make 7 million in budget cuts for next year and another 2 million afterward. And the garden program needs it was like $60,000 or maybe it was 50. Like it feels like incrementally not that much money to maintain their current function, their current sort of services that they're providing. But that's just sort of me saying my impression from sitting in on that meeting. We have 2 more of those meetings, this Wednesday and next Wednesday. So hopefully there'll be more clear. There certainly will be more clarity on this Wednesday. And then I think it's just some more conversation. But basically the meeting that I go to is basically just saying amongst, these different sort of reporting people from different areas, some parents, some, I think it's union leadership, some other, right, one of the principals goes like impressions based of what seems appropriate to cut versus not, and then that gets taken to school board, and the school board actually approves the budget. So this committee is just sort of giving impressions, and yeah, so that's sort of my take on what's been going on there. And like I said, like it doesn't seem like we have great clarity yet.
Any of you guys have any of the PTAs here that are representative put money towards the gardening position or that type of position?
I think it's Willard is ready to. I think they've already in their PTA budget planned that. At least that's what I was told.
Yeah, Longfellow gave money, but I think it's different for King, right? Because I think you guys have different.
We don't use the garden program. Yeah, it's all funded separate.
So we make up this year was a $35,000 conveyance donation to Edible Schoolyard. It was supposed to pay for the family nights out, but then they didn't have the family nights out, so I'm not. It's possible that they're using it for other things, but this is handy to know because we have to vote on our budget next week. So maybe we'll put in some more money for next year.
Well, and I don't know. I mean, again, my understanding is garden program at all the other schools is different than our Edible Schoolyard program, and the money is completely separate. But, I don't know. I was actually wondering if there wasn't potential, listening to them talk about it, if there wasn't potential for like working across the two programs. But I don't know. That's not really our say, I suppose.
I mean, I know this is being recorded, but my only fear with all of it is that it'll be a vote on after everyone is out of school.
Well, and it's all voted on at a board meeting, right? So at the end of the month. No, not the end of, is it the end of this month or beginning of next month? So
no, sometimes they have a meeting, right? They usually have a meeting like the week after school is out. At least that's what happened last year with Longfellow and our grass.
Oh, really? Yeah, I remember that.
2 meetings. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. Another point in our agenda was, how are our budget meetings going? Have folks met their fundraising goals or been able to reduce expenses? The folks that are here.
I mean, I know BAM has gone the other direction and decided to actually spend down their rainy day money by actually voting on a budget that's more than what they fundraised. And just said, we have this much in savings, let's use some of it because we're not really supposed to be holding this much money in savings. And so this last year, I think they gave way more money to classroom teachers for either field trips or materials. And I think next year there's other things. The other thing that came up was this is the first time that BAM has ever given money towards a position like a literacy coach. So they're funding, I think, maybe $35,000 towards a literacy coach. I can't remember the exact number, but so that's different. That was a late ad. Well, Amy's saying Emerson met goals and passed budget without real cuts. We wrote a check for $126,000 to the district.
I'd say King, I believe our budget meeting, we had to postpone, so it's next week. But I believe we've met our fundraising targets, and we did have a rainy day fund essentially that was sort of a holdover from COVID when we weren't spending money. So our new principal has made several requests that are constant urging, come up with some ways for some larger expenditures, like capital projects or mini capital projects. So he's provided a couple of ideas. So we're hopeful that those will get approved next week, and then we can buy some things over the summer.
I seem to remember King had lifeguards in their budget for a while, but as far as I know, it's been a long time since they've actually had swim lessons.
Yeah, no, those have been taken out because they couldn't find a lifeguard, that they being the district. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah, it is too bad. It's such a waste, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's sad because I know the city of Berkeley holds that time for King at King Pool. Yeah.
Which is silly. They're definitely not going there.
Right. No, I know, but I think they hold it because it's technically your King's Pool.
No, I know that. And it's silly of the city and the district not to talk, because I can speak on good authority that at least for the last 5 years, there's been no swimming for the kids at King. So it's too bad that they're holding it, because I'm sure there are many other community members who would love to use it during school time.
Well, it's too bad too that the district couldn't find a lifeguard with the city of Berkeley having lifeguards, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rita, we only had a couple more bullets, and it really was, unless other people have other topics, it was just we're going to start planning for next year. So we're asking folks if you have ideas or suggestions for next year of things we should cover. Like you said, in August, we're hoping to get a good group of folks coming out and kind of doing like things to know about the district and PTAs, kind of a education 101 kind of thing for new PTA members.
And especially like to really hit that home to the folks that are new to whatever PTA they're on. I don't know that any of us are actually going. The Peralta district does trainings as well. Those are specific towards presidents, treasurers, and secretaries. But like last year, the one for treasurers was in person in like Dublin on a Monday evening.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how I'm getting that. So
they're not very user friendly.
No. And so this to me was more like, let's have something that is a, welcome to the PTA. Here's, information that could be useful in whatever your role is. I feel like we could have a lot more coordination. I think most of our schools have some sort of giving campaign. It would be great to have some coordination across schools about tips and tricks and how to do something like that. And so having all the folks that do that work together a little bit more would be really awesome. Similarly I know there's the treasurers work group. It's really been paused the last like 6 months. But again, there's a lot of opportunity for that sort of thing. And like I said, like to me, the biggest learning curve is just figuring out, we're one cog in a super big machine, and sort of better understanding of how we fit into everything else.
Yeah, and that's a good segue. The last bullet point was Rita and I actually went to a school board meeting last week and last one, and we reported out on some of the discussions we had this year. We sent our notes to the superintendent and also all the school board members. And so we did get some response, like they said, thank you for giving us, the things that you guys are working on. And, we've always been given feedback. They want to hear from us more often. And so I think between Rita and I, that's one thing we thought we would do maybe once or twice in a school year, just to report back, just so they know that we're here. Our parent groups are very active, and that they keep us in the conversation. Because Rita, you brought up that situation where there was a working group and PTAs weren't invited, and we should have been in part of that conversation. I don't remember what that was about.
Yeah. Another like last sort of bullety thing that we should probably add to these minutes that should go out is that we really do need a PTA council treasurer. I can't be in both of those roles. And so I don't think we have anyone collecting budgets this year at a PTA council level. And I don't know, I mean, we need somebody who's going to be willing to step in and, you know, facilitate in the fall with getting things sent, you know, the per caps and everything sent out into Peralta, and then in the spring doing the filing taxes. So I don't think any of that, any one thing there is super challenging, but there needs to be somebody in that role. So if anybody knows somebody. Perhaps somebody who's been a treasurer would be awesome. So do you guys have thoughts on other topics for fall? Whether it's, you know, again, like coordination between PTAs across schools or info sessions. Again, we'll try and get the superintendent to come both fall and spring. But I'm totally open to other ideas as well. It would be nice to get more of our communities come attending.
Well, this is not an idea, I guess, it doesn't require a long conversation necessarily, but I would love to float the idea of perhaps some sort of co-op version of being an auditor for each other's PTAs. Our PTA has been utterly unable to find someone to be our auditor. So we are without an auditor. We have to have our, we can't, I mean, neither my co-president nor I can audit our own expenditures clearly. I would be happy to audit somebody else's if somebody would do ours, because I'm sure the Peralta folks are going to come down on us hard for not having an audit, but I can't force someone to do it. So anyway, I'll just throw that out there. If any other school is absent an audit, we would trade services.
That's a great idea. And Liz, if I can, in the fall, throw it out. I think there's also always great conversations with our BPTA listserv. You threw that idea out there. I think those are very productive of people just asking questions and people are quick to respond.
Right.
Or quicker to respond than in a meeting. So good idea.
Another topic that, let's see, that came up, I want to say right before the last meeting. I'm going to try and bring up the notes that I have on this. It was about safety and rolling drop-offs and things like that. So we had a safety committee, right, that came up around mostly elementary schools, but basically getting buzzers at all the doors. But you know, there's also like safety in other areas of safely getting kids to school. And so, you know, trying to see if there's interest in getting like doing some work at the next level of organizing to try and see if there's changes to be made. You know, I know BAM does a rolling drop off, but I know we're one school, and I think only 4 or 5 of the elementary schools does that. And our pickup's a mess. There's no rolling pickup. So it's just sort of chaos. I've seen car accidents happen right in front of the pickup because people are not paying enough attention to very slow moving car accidents, but they happen. So if
I think that would be a great topic.
Yeah, I mean, I know King and Berkeley High have different sort of issues around that. Most kids are getting to school more independently. But still, I know there's a lot of traffic around King for drop off and pickup, and I don't know about the other schools.
But having had 9 years at Craigmont, I can totally attest to the fact that at least when I was there was no rolling drop off, and that would have been handy.
Okay. Any
That's
other
all we
thoughts?
have. Yeah, that's all we have, Rita. I don't know if it's
Yeah. You might need to get back to enjoying that pool.
I have
Oh,
two
yeah.
naked boys
Guys
running
on
around the room
vacation.
right now. I was threatening them to be on recording if they want to keep interrupting us, but maybe it's time.
Di's on vacation. We all get to be envious.
Which island are you,
Yes.
which island are you on, Di?
What's that?
Which island are you on?
Well, this is being recorded, you
Oh,
know, because they're out sick right now, but I am on Maui.
Maui, North Carolina.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
this is all
everyone
taking place during spring break, I believe. So this recording, right?
Well,
That
if I
sounds
don't see everyone, everyone have a nice summer. Enjoy
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll see everyone in August.
Amy is asking when the recording will be available. Do we figure we can send that out like in the
I'll
next
try to
few
send
days?
it out. Yeah, our minutes are
When
going to
do
be
you
short.
get
I'll try to
that?
send it. I'll send it out in the next couple of days.
You sure you don't want to wait till you come back?
We should probably stop
Well,
recording, right? For that. Oh,
what's that?
I was gonna say you might want to stop recording, right? If you're talking.
Oh, yeah.
Let me. Yep. I'll
Stop
go
it.
edit it, but yes, I'll you know, I'll get it out by Memorial Day week, right after Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds great. And again, like I think we